Hi everybody. Last week I introduced compiled style sheets and we covered an introduction to less. This week I'd like to do SASS. Now when you look at the job ads for front-end developers, generally you're going to see both combined. They'll say needs to understand compiled style sheets, less, and SASS. Well, SASS is an acronym for syntactically awesome style sheets. And on this video, there's going to be an attachment of less scripts. So what I've done is I've dragged the folder for SASS that you have into my Sublime client. And let's take a look, and we'll go ahead and compile these as we go through each one. So what you're looking at right here is SASS formatting. There's no parentheses, there's no curly braces, there's no semicolons. Each and every line gets its own statement. So if I were to copy and paste this and go into my browser and look at the online SASS compiler, like so, we would see that this SASS right here compiles into this right here, where we have a div. So that means all you have to worry about is the same selectors that you're used to. The hashtag is an ID, the dot is a class. So let's take a look at the next one. Let's think about variables, because we learned that last week. So I'm going to take number 2 variable SASS and paste it into my compiler. Now generally, I know when I work on a Mac, I have Ruby compiling this on the fly. So I can write SASS and have it compile to the results page here. But it would compile into a style sheet on the fly. So right now in line 1 we have red, which is a variable. And that's great. So if I click on compile SASS here, you should see H1 color red, my 2 variables up here. It looks very much like less, doesn't it? And that's why these things are sort of simultaneous in the help wanted ads. So I have a variable for red, and down here I have a color darkened for red, and you see P, and you see we've taken the color red and darkened it by 10%, and that's why the hexadecimal is slightly darker. So last week we covered less, and I showed you that you could do some math with it, and the same applies here. You just need to know the syntax for it. Now, the website itself is sass-lang, SASS language, and they offer several different versions, but this is definitely something you want to put in your arsenal if you feel that you are at a point where the intermediate CSS that's taught in this class needs to be extended. So this is your next step. So that's script 2. Let's take a look at a math version, and in this case I have a class called addition and subtraction, which is part of a p tag. I can compile this, and hopefully, oh excuse me, I have to define red, so I'll go ahead and do that. Red is this, so I'll go ahead and add this to my math, and I'll add the font size as well because that variable is being called. So variables are very important to this, but I would say the mix-ins that we're going to get in a second are going to be even more important. So I have all my values here, and we have P addition and subtraction, and red minus hashtag 101, which is the value of this. We're actually removing this. So notice how font size is added 10 pixels. And it will, just like less, offer math, even though px is a string. So you're compiling strings together. So that's an example of math. Again, I think one of the most important things that we'll be doing with this is the mix-ins in script 6. But let's take a look at this right now. This is an example of selector nesting. And I'm going to paste this in and compile it. And here you see speaker with name, and over on the right you see speaker and name as well. And we're taking our font size, and of course that's going to be 22 pixels. But look at position. Position calls the same font size. So only for this instance of size is font size 22 pixels. This is the only one. So we've nested classes into our main class. And we can do that with IDs. We can do it all the way through. It's the same rules as less. They're very, very similar. Alright, so that's selector nesting. Let's go to the next one. This is property nesting, and in this case we're going to nest weights and sizes into the fonts. Very cool, and I think it's because I'm older and been around a long time that I appreciate any time we can get dynamic with this. And any keystroke saved I appreciate, and it makes this look good. So I've compiled this, and on the right you see speaker name, but look at font. This is what we're looking at right here. We've nested font properties inside the property itself. So where we're used to font dash weight, we see font with a nested bold. Now this has to be 2 spaces deep for this to be nested, and it has to be exact. I'm going to go ahead and do this and compile, and you see I get an invalid. That's an important part of what we're doing here. So if I do 1, 2, 1, 2, now we should be in better shape, and we are. So that is nested property. Very interesting that they do this. That's a little bit different from what we've learned with less. Now this next script is the all-famous mix-ins, and if you remember from last week, less does it fantastically. Well, so does SASS. And I'm just going to repeat myself from last week. The last time I applied for a front-end development job, they gave me a Photoshop document that I had to code, and they were interested in the mix-ins specifically. And that was on intel from people inside the company. So what we have here is, similar to less, a mix-in. And if you look, we are calling border radius right here. The amount is 5 pixels. So if you look at this, we're using include border radius 2 pixels. So this value is actually a parameter for 5 pixels, but we replaced it with 2. And that's why we get this, because we've defined the amount. This is a variable. And it's 5 pixels if there is nothing sent to it. But in this case, we've ordered a mix-in to be 2. And that means the H1 has 2 pixels all the way down the bike, because amount is 2 pixels. Now over here it'll be 5 because we didn't send any argument. And that sort of explains one of the most important things we've seen over the last 2 weeks about mix-ins and sending parameters that alter a value. And in this case, the default value is 5 pixels. So this is probably the most important script in the bunch. Generally, how you plan your CSS and how you build it is what an employer will look at. So only one more, and this is inheritance. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this into our code, and we have an inheritance where we have H1 border px solid, which is fine. It's right here. But we've extended H1 here, and by using this extend keyword, we've extended all the values into speaker so that we get the same values. It's H1 comma speaker, but the border width itself does not apply to H1. It's only to the speaker itself. So the extension only applies to H1 comma dot speaker for both. So we've extended those properties, but it's still separate. This is very important. Okay, so how does this relate to you in week 11 of this course? Well, the fact is we have 5 weeks left, and you're building your own project, a portfolio piece right now. And if you choose to create a compiler, it would certainly help the value of that portfolio piece. I highly recommend it. So if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to get back to me. Okay, thanks.